everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive. You know how we do it here. Today, we're taking a look at early 2025 cybersecurity. And let me tell you, the sources are wild. We've got blog posts, advisories, research reports, like a smorgasbord of cyber insights.
More like a cybersecurity buffet.
Yeah, exactly. But with this buffet, you got to be careful not to overeat, you know?
That's where we come in. We'll help you digest the most important bits.
Exactly. We're on the hunt for those under-the-radar trends, the ones that don't always make headlines but could really mess things up, and of course, those specific vulnerabilities that keep popping up.
And more importantly, we're going to equip you with the strategies you need to navigate this increasingly complex digital world.
It's not just about being bombarded with information, right?
It's about knowing what questions to ask and having the tools to find the answers.
Exactly. Think of it like we're giving you a cybersecurity toolkit, not just a lecture.
Perfect analogy. And trust me, you'll need these tools because what we're seeing in these reports is pretty intense.
Kidding, like global tensions are spilling over into cyberspace in a big way.
It's crazy how these real-world conflicts are basically fueling this surge in cyber espionage.
And who are they targeting?
Companies and institutions pushing the boundaries of tech innovation, the ones developing cutting-edge stuff.
So it's not just about stealing data anymore?
Not at all. It's about disrupting actual production, really messing with a country's ability to innovate and compete. One report even mentioned this group. They called them the librarian ghouls. They were specifically targeting 3D models and designs.
Like the blueprints for new tech.
Exactly. Imagine the impact if a nation-state actor got their hands on that kind of information. They could cripple entire industries.
That's a scary thought, and it makes you realize this stuff impacts everyone, not just tech giants, right?
Absolutely. Even something like the sanctions situation, it's having all these ripple effects.
Yeah, I've been reading about that.
There's a growing market for bypassing license restrictions just to get cheaper tech.
Which makes sense in a way, but
that's where you have to be super careful. Cheaper tech might sound appealing, but there's almost always a hidden cybersecurity cost.
it's like buying a used car without checking the engine first.
Exactly. You might save money up front, but it could cost you way more in the long run.
Okay, that's a good way to put it. So we've got geopolitical tensions, cyber espionage, and now, get this, AI is becoming a major player in cybersecurity.
Oh, yeah. AI, it's a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, attackers are using it to make their attacks more efficient, harder to detect. But at the same time, security professionals are using AI to try and stay one step ahead.
So it's like a digital arms race powered by algorithms.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really interesting development, the OWASP Non-Human Identities Top 10 list.
Non-human identity sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It kind of is, but it's also very real and very important. This list highlights a crucial point. Machines have different vulnerabilities than humans.
Yeah, so we need a whole separate set of rules for securing them.
It's exactly. This list focuses on the security risks associated with things like API keys and other machine identities.
Okay, so like if an API key has too much access, it's like giving someone a master key to your entire house.
A single compromised key could grant access to tons of sensitive data and systems.
So even if I'm not running some massive corporation, this AI stuff still matters to me. My smart home, my online banking, all that.
Absolutely. These systems are increasingly powered by AI, and understanding the basics of how AI impacts cybersecurity is becoming essential for everyone.
Got it. AI is a game changer. All right. So we've covered some pretty high-level stuff, but let's zoom in a bit. What about those everyday vulnerabilities, the ones we might not even be aware of?
Those are often the entry point for more sophisticated attacks. It's like leaving the back door unlocked.
And it looks like our sources found a few of those lurking in some pretty popular software, Observium Office, DCMTK, What's Up Gold.
And here's a statistic that really brings it home. 75% of scanned infusion pumps, the ones used in hospitals to deliver medication, had security gaps.
Seriously, 75%? That's alarming.
It really underscores that cybersecurity isn't just some abstract concept.
Yeah.
It impacts our lives in very real and potentially dangerous ways.
So it's not just about protecting data anymore, it's about protecting people.
Exactly.
Okay, so what can organizations do to address these vulnerabilities? Is it as simple as installing the latest updates?
Patching is important, but it's only part of the solution. Organizations need to think bigger. Network segmentation, access controls, being a culture of security.
Right, it's not just about putting a Band-Aid on the problem, you have to address the underlying issues.
And speaking of addressing underlying issues, let's talk about the human element. Our sources highlighted this analysis by the SANS Internet Storm Center. Yeah. They're looking at some Python malware that was incredibly sneaky.
Oh, yeah, I read about that one, the way they hid the final payload in a fake SQLite database.
Talk about sneaky, right?
It's like hiding a virus inside a decoy file.
It's a great example of how attackers are constantly innovating, finding new ways to bypass security measures. But more importantly, it highlights how social engineering is still a huge factor.
So even with the best tech in place, a single wrong click by an employee can open the door to a breach.
Precisely. That's why security awareness training is so important. Employees need to be educated about phishing scams, suspicious emails, all that stuff. They're the first line of defense.
And speaking of first lines of defense, let's talk about those top 10 worst PIM codes that were circulating in one of the reports. Some of them were just wow.
It's almost comical, but it also serves as a reminder that predictability is the enemy of security. Whether we're talking about PIM codes, passwords, or security practices, the more predictable we are, the easier we make it for attackers.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Geopolitical tensions, AI-powered attacks, everyday vulnerabilities. The human element, it's a lot to take in.
It is, but remember, the goal isn't to overwhelm you. It's to equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to navigate this landscape safely and effectively.
So take a deep breath, everyone. We're about to dive into the next part of this deep dive, where we'll explore some proactive strategies to strengthen your defenses and stay ahead of the curve. Stay tuned.
So knowledge is power, right? But how do we turn that knowledge into action? That's the real challenge.
Right, it's easy to get overwhelmed with all this information. Like, where do we even start?
Well, I think step one is understanding your attack surface. What systems, data applications are most critical to your organization, and where those potential points of entry for attackers might be.
So it's kind of like a digital home inspection, but for security risks?
Exactly. Once you have a clear picture of your attack surface, you can start prioritizing your defenses.
Okay, so you're saying focus your resources where they matter most.
Precisely. It's all about taking a risk-based approach. And remember, technology is only part of the solution.
Right, we talked about social engineering, but what about building a culture of security within an organization?
That's a crucial point. You need to educate your employees about cybersecurity best practices. Train them to identify and report suspicious activity.
So make cybersecurity everyone's responsibility, not just the IT department's problem.
Exactly. Empower your employees to be part of the solution. Make security an enabler, not a hindrance.
Right, because sometimes it can feel like security is just getting in the way.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between security and usability. And a big part of that is adopting a proactive approach.
One of our sources really hammered home the need for that proactive mindset. But what does that actually look like, in practice?
It means we can't just sit back and wait for attacks to happen. We need to be actively hunting for threats, monitoring our systems, and mitigating risks before they can be exploited.
So playing offense instead of defense.
Exactly. Anticipate threats and take steps to prevent them.
Okay, I like that. Be proactive, not reactive. But how do we actually do that? What are some concrete steps?
Threat intelligence is a good starting point. Organizations need to stay up to date on the latest threats, vulnerabilities, attacker tactics.
So like a weather forecast, but for cyber attacks?
Precisely. By knowing what's on the horizon, you can prepare for potential storms.
Makes sense. And what about vulnerability management? It seems like there's a new vulnerability discovered every day.
It's a constant battle, but it's one we can't afford to lose. Organizations need a robust vulnerability management program. Assess remediate vulnerabilities quickly.
Like patching a leaky roof before it causes major damage.
Another great analogy, the sooner you patch those leaks, the less likely you are to experience a major security incident.
Yeah.
Now, remember those librarian ghouls we talked about earlier?
Yeah, the ones targeting those 3D models and designs.
Well, it turns out they were using a technique called hex staging to deliver their malware.
Hex staging, that sounds pretty technical.
It is essentially they break down malicious code into small hex-encoded chunks and then deliver them piecemeal and assemble them on the victim's system.
So it's like a digital jigsaw puzzle of malware that's pretty insidious.
It is, and it highlights the need for a multi-layered approach to security, what experts call defense in depth.
So you can't just rely on one security solution.
Exactly. You need multiple layers of defense, each with its own strengths and weaknesses working together to protect your systems. And data, think of it like diversifying your investments.
You wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Spread the risk. And speaking of spreading the risk, one of our sources pointed out a growing trend that we need to be aware of. Attackers are increasingly targeting not just traditional IT systems, but also operational technology, or OT.
OT, I'm not familiar with that term. What does it include?
OT refers to the systems that control physical processes and infrastructure, things like power grids, manufacturing plants, water treatment facilities, transportation systems, the stuff that keeps our society running.
Wow, so the stakes are incredibly high if those systems get hacked.
They are. And many of these OT systems are vulnerable because they were designed and built in a time when cybersecurity wasn't a major concern.
It's like trying to secure a medieval castle against modern-day weaponry.
Very accurate analogy, which is why organizations need to start taking OT security seriously. They need to assess their risks, implement appropriate controls, and make sure their staff are trained to identify and respond to threats.
Because a cyber attack on an OT system could have devastating consequences not just for the organization, but for everyone.
Imagine a power outage caused by a cyber attack in the middle of winter lives. Could be lost.
That's a sobering thought.
It is,
Yeah.
but it's a reality we need to face. The threat is real, and the time to act is now.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive so far, from geopolitical tensions to AI to vulnerabilities in everyday software, and now OT security. My head is spinning.
But remember, the goal isn't to overwhelm you. It's to equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to navigate this landscape safely and effectively.
So take a deep breath, everyone. We're about to dive into the final part of this episode where we'll explore some proactive strategies to strengthen your defenses and stay ahead of the curve. Okay, so we're back and ready for part three. After all that talk about threats and vulnerabilities, it's time to shift gears and talk solutions. How do we actually protect ourselves?
A lot of it comes back to what we discussed earlier, that digital home inspection, the attack surface assessment. That's really the foundation.
So we're talking about being strategic, right? Not just trying to protect everything all at once.
It's exactly identify your most critical assets, figure out where they're most vulnerable, and then prioritize your defenses accordingly.
Okay, that makes sense. But even after you've identified those weaknesses, how do you keep up with them? It seems like there's always a new threat emerging.
You're right about that the threat landscape is constantly shifting, which is why threat intelligence is so important. Think of it like a weather forecast, but for cyber attacks.
Okay, I like that. Stay ahead of the storm.
Exactly. By staying informed about the latest threats, the vulnerabilities, the tactics attackers are using, you can anticipate those potential storms and prepare accordingly.
So it's not just about reacting to attacks after they happen. It's about anticipating them and being proactive.
Precisely. And another crucial piece is vulnerability management. Remember those leaky roofs we talked about?
Yeah, I gotta patch those up quickly.
Exactly. You need a system in place to identify those leaks, assess how serious they are, and then fix them fast before they can cause real damage.
So it's all about having a solid process for finding and fixing vulnerabilities before the attackers can exploit them.
Precisely. But remember, technology is only part of the equation. We can't forget about the human element.
Right. We've talked a lot about security awareness training for employees, but how do you build that broader culture of security, make it a priority without overwhelming people?
It's all about communication,
Yep.
education, and empowerment. Make sure everyone understands why security matters, how it impacts their work, give them the tools and training they need to make smart decisions.
So make security everyone's responsibility, not just the IT department's burden to bear.
Exactly, and it's about creating an environment where people feel comfortable speaking up. If they see something suspicious, they should feel safe reporting it without fear of getting in trouble.
That makes sense. You don't want to punish people for trying to do the right thing.
Exactly. Transparency, open communication, those are key to building a strong security culture.
Okay, so to sum it all up, we're talking about a multi-layered approach, right? Understand your attack surface, prioritize your defenses, stay ahead of emerging threats, manage those vulnerabilities effectively, and build a culture of security within your organization. Did I miss anything?
I think you covered the essentials. It's about being proactive, vigilant, and adaptable. The threat landscape is constantly evolving, so we need to be constantly learning and evolving our strategies as well.
So it's a never-ending game of cat and mouse with the bad guys.
In a way, yes, but it's a game we can win if we work together and stay one step ahead.
Well said, and that brings us to the end of our cybersecurity deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, from geopolitical tensions to AI-powered attacks to vulnerabilities in everyday software, and the importance of building a strong security culture. Phew, it's been a journey.
It has, but hopefully a valuable one.
Absolutely, and to our listeners out there, I hope you're walking away with a better understanding of the threats, the vulnerabilities, and most importantly, those proactive strategies you can use to protect yourselves and your organizations.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about cybersecurity, the better equipped you'll be to navigate this complex world safely and effectively.
So stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay proactive. And if you're ever feeling lost or overwhelmed, remember, you're not alone. There's a whole community of security professionals out there ready to help.
That's right. We're all in this together.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, stay safe out there, everyone.